Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What's going on? Peace and power elevation. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. Live in effect. So today's subject, I am going to be dealing with the concept of what is epistemology. What is epistemology? But the biggest question becomes, what is knowledge? The biggest question becomes, what is knowledge? So I want to get into the subject of what is epistemology, right? And the biggest question becomes, what is knowledge? Oftentimes, we hear about what knowledge is, right? Why it's important to have knowledge. You got to have knowledge. But what does that exactly mean to have knowledge? All right, so before I even get started, I want to say thank you guys who have been subscribed to my channel, like my channel, share my channel, all that great stuff. Yeah, so for those of you that have been like my channel, share my channel, subscribe to my channel, I want to thank y'all so much. It really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. So continue to share the channel and do all those great things. All right. So now let's go ahead and get into the subject. So first and foremost, before we even ask the question about what is knowledge, let's deal with what is epistemology. Now, I'm going to walk through this. And as I walk through this, I'm going to explain in my own terminology, in my own words. But let's walk through the definition, all right? And then I have many other definitions along with that. So epistemology. Whew. Epistemology is the theory of knowledge, right? It's the branch of philosophy concerned with knowledge. Epistemology studies the nature, the origin, and scope of knowledge, epistemic justification, the rationality of belief, and various related issues. Epistemology is considered a major subfield of philosophy, along with other major subfields such as ethics, logic, and metaphysics, right? Now it goes in to talk about the debates in epistemology are generally clustered around four core areas, which is the philosophical analysis of nature, knowledge, and the condition required for a belief to constitute knowledge, such as truth and justification. Potential sources of knowledge and justified beliefs, such as perception, reason, memory, and testimony. And then the third one is the structure of a body of knowledge or justified belief, including whether all justified knowledge must be derived from justified foundational beliefs, or whether justification requires only a coherent set of beliefs. And then the fourth one is philosophical skepticism, which questions the possibility of knowledge and related problems, such as whether skepticism poses a threat to our ordinary knowledge claims, and whether it is possible to refute skeptical arguments. All right, so in these debates and other epistemology aims to answer questions such as, what do we know? What does it mean to say that we know something? What makes justified beliefs justified? And what do we know that we know? All right, so that's the Wikipedia terminology. Okay. So basically, the question is, epistemology deals with the theory of knowledge. So to break it down in layman's term, it's basically an introduction to knowledge. It's an introduction to knowledge because it basically asks, well, what is knowledge? What does it mean to have a knowledge? Because when you say knowledge, what does that mean? So now let's go into another source. All right. So this source is from plato.stanford.edu. So let's go on Plato. Let's go to the website. Now I'm walking you guys through this, okay? So Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And peace to the chat. Shout out to the chat. All right, so epistemology, right? The term epistemology comes from the Greek words episteme and logos. Episteme can be translated as knowledge or understanding or acquaintance, while logos can be translated as account or argument or reason. Okay, just as each of these different translations captures some facet of the meaning of these Greek terms, so too does each translation capture a different facet of epistemology itself. Now, although the term epistemology is no more than a couple of centuries old, the field of epistemology is at least as old as any in philosophy. So in different parts of its extensive history, different facets of epistemology have attracted attention. Plato's epistemology was attempted to understand what it was to know and how knowledge, unlike mere truth opinion, is good for the knower. So Locke's epistemology was an attempt to understand the operation of human understanding. Kant's epistemology was an attempt to understand the condition of the possibility of human understanding. And Russell's epistemology was an attempt to understand how modern science could be justified by appeal to sensory experience, etc. So let's go down to what it says the varieties of cognitive success. There are many different kinds of cognitive success, and they differ from one another along various dimensions. Exactly what these various kinds of success are, and how they differ from each other, and how they are explanatory related to each other, and how they can be achieved or obstrued, and are all matters of controversy. This session provides some background to these various controversies. So what kind of success or what kind of things enjoy cognitive success? That's a good question. Now, I ain't going to get into too much of all of this, but let's just read the first paragraph. Let's go over the first paragraph a little bit. So it says cognitive successes can differ from each other by virtue of qualifying different kinds of things. For instance, a cognitive success like that of making a discovery may be the success of a person, or of a laboratory, or of a people, or even perhaps of a psychological fragment of a person. But some kind of cognitive success, like that of having successfully cultivated a highly discriminating palate, say, may be the success of a person, perhaps even a people, but cannot be the success of a laboratory or of a psychological fragment. And other kinds of cognitive and other kinds of cognitive success, like that of being conclusively established by all the available evidence, may be the success of a theory, but cannot be the success of a person, or like that of being epistemically fruitful may be the success of a research program or of a particular proof strategy, but not of a theory. Indeed, there is a vast range of things spanning different metaphysical categories that can enjoy one or another kind of cognitive success. All right. So it says we can evaluate the cognitive success of a mental state, such as that of believing a particular proposition, or of an act, such as that of drawing a particular conclusion, or of a procedure, such as a particular procedure for revising degrees of confidence in response to evidence, or a particular procedure for acquiring new evidence, or of a relation such as mathematical relation between an agent credence function in one evidential state and her credence function in another evidential state, or the relation of trust between one person and another. So therefore, with epistemology, that comes along with different kind of cognitive success. So somebody may be successful in researching a paper. Somebody might be successful in figuring out a mathematical problem, right? Somebody might be successful as into coming up with a creative idea. You see what I'm saying? So that's various form of cognitive success. But still, the question becomes, well, how does that constitute the knowledge? What type of role does knowledge play into that? And I'm gonna get into that in a moment. All right. But let me go into my archive real fast. Peace to all my fellow members that come through, all my fellow subscribers. I see y'all. I see y'all coming in deep and heavy. So now right here, I have a book. So I have several books, but let's go into this book, Epistemology, a contemporary introduction to the theory of knowledge, right? Let's go into it. Let's look at the introduction. So what it says, perception, belief, and justification. Philosophers have thought a great deal about these matters, especially about the nature of perceiving and about what we can know or may mistakenly think we know through perception or through other sources of knowledge, such as memory as a storehouse or what we have learned in the past, consciousness as revealing our inner lives, reflection as a way to acquire knowledge of abstract matters, and testimony as providing knowledge originally acquired by others. In approaching these topics in epistemology, the theory of knowledge and justification, it is appropriate to begin with perception. Now, the author goes on to say, in my opening description, what I detailed was what I perceived, what I saw, heard, smelled, felt, and taste. Right? In describing my experience, I also expressed some of what I believe, that there was a green field before me, that there were bird songs, that there was a smell of rose, that was my glass felt cold, and that the tea tastes of mint. All right, so it seemed altogether natural to believe these things given my experience. All right, so here it goes when they talk about justification as process as status as a property. So being justified in a sense illustrated by my beliefs about what is really clear before me need to not be a result of a process. Being justified is not. For instance, like being purified, which requires a process of purification. My beliefs about what is before me are not just justified because they have been through a process of being justified. All right, so to kind of just sum that part up, basically, you're dealing with the concept of subjectivity and objectivity, right? You deal with the concept of subjectivity and the objectivity. Why is that? Because when we deal with what we call knowledge, and I still have not got to what knowledge is, we're dealing with things. We can look at things from the concept of our subjective point of view or our objective point of view. But a lot of times we deal with subjective because you cannot have the objective without the subjective. Meaning that you got to have your own perception, right? You got to have your own experience. That's where phenomenology come in. All right, so I will do another topic about phenomenology later. But that's where that come in, because you got to be able to have your own experience about this thing called life. So this is why so many ideas and laws and all of that come into place, because of one's perception, people's perception, ideas. So everything starts off with a subjectivity. So when people say things like everything starts from nothing, that means that when it starts from nothing, that means it comes off in a subjective way. Then once it goes from the subjective, then it eventually becomes the objective after a while. I appreciate you, Centavo. Shout out to you guys that like the channel, subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. All right. But everything starts from a beginning, from a subjective point of view. It starts off as a perception until it can be proven. Why you think scientific theory come into existence? Why you think scientific method come into existence? Because you got to be able to test something. You got to be able to prove it, right? You got to be able to go through the process of falsibility, correct? But in order to do that, you got to have something subjective. You got to have something that's hypothetical, right? Which is the hypothesis. That means basically you coming up with an educated guess and you have your own point of view. Now you got to take that educated guess and be able to put it into test to see that it can be falsified. Okay, if it cannot be falsified and it has been proven numerous time and time again and there's nothing to falsify, then pretty much it has passed the test. You know, so you have to be able to go through the trials and error. But know this, everything have its subjectivity, okay? Everything gonna start in the beginning. All right. So let me go ahead and keep it moving. Let's go on to the next one. Let's go to part 1 of this book. All right, so now let's go down to where it says the elements and basic kinds of perception. There are apparently at least 4 elements in perception: the perceiver, me; the object, the field, I see; 3, the sensory experience, say my visual experience of colors and shape; and 4, the relation between the object and the subject, commonly taken to be a casual relation by which the object produce the sensory experience in the perceiver. To see the field is apparently to have a certain sensory experience as a result of the impact of the field on our vision. Pretty much going back to what I was saying before, right? Check this out. Some accounts of perception add to the 4 items on this list, others subtract from it. To understand perception, we must consider both kinds of account and how these elements are to be conceived in relation to one another. But first, it is essential to explore an example of perception. Correct? Now, it said there are several quite different ways to speak of perception. Each corresponds to a different way of perpetually responding to experience. We often speak simply of what people perceive. For instance, see. We also speak of what they perceive the object to be, and we commonly talk of facts they know through perception, such as that the grass is long. Visual perception most readily illustrate this. So let us start there. And let's go now. It says the first case is one of simple perception. Perception taken by itself. Here, visual perception. I see the field, and this experience is the visual parallel of hearing a bird, touching a glass, smelling rose, and tasting mint. If the first case is simply perceiving of some object, the second is the case of perceiving to be, as it is seeing something to be so. I do not just see the field as when I drive by at high speed and do not even realize what it is my peripheral vision. Rather, I see the field to be rectangular. The third case is one of perceiving that it is seeing that a particular thing is so, namely that the field is rectangular. All right, so let me give a better example. Let's say you go on let me try to think. Let's say you walk down the road, right? Let's say you walk down the road, you walk down the path. Now there's a 2-way. The road is split into 2. You got this road over here, and you got the road over here to the left. Now, me or 3 other people, we go down to that 2 road. Now, I may go down this road right here and see something that is beneficial, that's something that I see that this road has a peaceful lane, and it's going to take me to a direction where I can be around trees. I can be around the forest. I can be around nature, or just being able to relax and chill. And this part of the road where it's nothing but a bunch of dirt, a bunch of grassland, and it seemed like it's just pretty empty and depressing to me. So in my mind, I see that, well, this road is not the way that I want to go, because it looks very depressing to me, and it's nothing but dirt and grass. And where can I get some sense of peace out of that? I'd rather go where, if I go down this road, I could see a bunch of trees. I could see I could see forests. I can be around animals like birds or whatever, just be able to get peace of mind. So this is where I would want to be. Now, the second person might see the same thing that I'm seeing, but that second person might say, well, I don't want to go down there where the trees and the forest is at and where the birds is. I want to go down where this dirt and where the grassland is at. So I'm going to go down to this road right here. Because, see, there's something about this road that attracts me. There's something that I'm getting out this road. There's something about it. So I can better experience on this road than I would over there. And then the third person, they don't, for them, it's either or. So the third person is either or. The third person might see where I'm coming from, right? But that third person can also see where the second person is coming from, right? So for that individual, they can take either or, and it won't affect them in any kind of way. They can say, well, or they can have experience what we both went through. That person can say, well, I've been down this road and I've seen what you have experienced, but I also been down this road and I've seen what this person have experienced. So I could take either route. You see what I'm saying? So at the end, it's all about your perception. That's basically what I'm trying to get at. So, but I know that still won't answer the question as to what is knowledge, Tiffany? Where does knowledge come into play on that? Because you give an example. I'm just playing a scenario here, you guys, okay? But a person might ask, well, where does knowledge come into? Where does knowledge come in at, Tiffany? Because what you're doing, you're just giving examples. You're giving your own perception. Now let's bring the knowledge into the picture. Where does the knowledge come in? All right, so now let's go ahead and explain what knowledge is. Let's explain what knowledge is. But if you guys want to, when you get a chance to, make sure you guys read this book right here. It's called Epistemology, a contemporary introduction of the theory of knowledge. All right, so let me go on to the next book. Well, you know what? I'm not even going to go, before I go to the next book, let me go to the next article. Now that question becomes knowledge. Exactly what is knowledge? Give me a moment, y'all. So, So now, the question is, what is knowledge? Now, is there one definition for the word knowledge? Is knowledge one definition? Or is there multiple facets of definition of the word knowledge? Let's find out. Okay, so right here, Knowledge is a familiarity of awareness of someone or something, such as facts, descriptive knowledge, skills, procedural knowledge, or objects, acquaintance knowledge, often contributing to understanding. By most accounts, knowledge can be produced in many different ways and from many sources, including but not limited to perception, reason, memory, testimony, scientific inquiry, education, and practice. The philosophical study of knowledge is called epistemology. We already went over that. Okay? So the term knowledge can be referred to a theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. It can be implicit, as with practical skills or expertise, or explicit, as with the theoretical understanding of a subject. Formal or informal, systematic or particular. The philosopher Plato argued that there was a distinction between knowledge and true belief in the Theocritus leading, meaning to attribute to him a definition of knowledge as justified true belief. The difficulties with this definition raised by Gitter problem have been the subject of extensive debate in epistemology for more than a half a century. Now, as you can see, it says that there's been debate as far as what the terminology of knowledge is. As we can see, there's multiple definitions as to it, right? But the main thing is being able to be familiarized with something, or being able to gain consciousness or awareness of a particular object or a particular thing or someone, correct? But it named different forms of knowledge: descriptive knowledge, procedural knowledge, acquaintance knowledge, right? It named those three, okay? But check this out. What makes knowledge justified as truth? What brings justification? Meaning that what makes it a truth? So when we say knowledge now, the question is what makes it justified? Because we got various forms of knowledge out here, right? We got knowledge that's based on logic, and that's based on facts, that based on information that can be proven. Then we got knowledge that is based on pseudoism, knowledge that can be falsified, knowledge that cannot really be proven. We got different form of knowledge. But what makes it justifiable? Who to say that this information or this knowledge is justifiable? How is that determined? So one may ask that, well, how do you justify that as being true? Because see, what you may call your truth may be a different truth to somebody else. Again, we got to go back to that concept of perception. So going back to the example that I was using earlier, right, about the two roads that you take. The one road that leads you down to the dirt and the grass and a bunch of nothing, right? And the other road that leads you down to the forest, to the trees, and to the animals like the birds and all of that. Okay, so what I was dealing with is the concept of perception. Now, how does knowledge come in? Because it's based on experiment. It is based on experiment. Because in order for you to have that knowledge, you have to get familiarized with something. And in order for you to become familiarized, you have to be able to go through the experiment of learning. That's where the learning has to come in. You have to be able to experiment it. If you don't experience, then how do you gain the knowledge of it? How can't you say you have a knowledge of something if you have not experienced it? If you have not studied it? So a person, the first person, like I said, using myself as an example, I can say that, well, that forest or that tree over there gives me more life and it's more beneficial, and I connect better with the tree. Then I can go down to this road where there is a bunch of grassland and a bunch of dirt. And that second person say, well, that grassland, that dirt gave me some type of connection and gave me some type of understanding about life. But the third person is the one that really had the most knowledge, because that third person was able to experience both, go down to both roles and see what it was like to walk down both of those paths. So that person has more experience, and that person was more well studious about both of the roles than 1 and 2, because 1 and 2 only been down one path, whereas the third person been down both paths. I hope that's a good example. I hope y'all following me. If y'all get it, just let me know if y'all get it. All right, type it in if y'all get what I'm saying, if y'all still there. All right, so then we go down to the concept of theories of knowledge, correct? The eventual demarcation of philosophy from science was made possible by the notion that philosophy core was theory of knowledge, a theory distinct from the sciences because it was their foundation. Without this idea of theory of knowledge, it is hard to imagine what philosophy could have been in the age of modern science. Woo! Richard Rorty, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature. Okay. So it goes on to say that knowledge is the primary subject of the field of epistemology, which studies what we know, how we come to know it, and what it means to know something. Defining knowledge is an important aspect of epistemology because it does not suffice to have a belief. One must also have good reason for that belief, but because otherwise there would be no reason to prefer one belief over another. Let's look at that. Let's highlight that for a moment. I'm gonna highlight that and I'm gonna read that again slowly. But as I'm reading it slowly, it's gonna be a process in the mind. It says defining knowledge is an important aspect of epistemology because it does not suffice to have a belief. One must also have good reasons for that belief, because otherwise there would be no reason to prefer one belief over another. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Ain't that something? All right. Now, it's going to talk about self-knowledge, but see, I'm going to get into self-knowledge later. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a part 2 video dealing with the concept of self-knowledge, or that what is knowledge yourself. Okay. I'm going to get into that later. I probably did that before. Did I ever make a video about self-knowledge? No, I didn't. No, I have never made a video about self-knowledge, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to make that a video. Okay. But let's go down to the concept where it says the value of knowledge. All right, so it says what? It is generally assumed that knowledge is more valuable than mere truth belief. If so, what is the explanation? A formulation of the value problem in epistemology first occurred in Plato's Meno. Socrates pointed out to Meno that a man who knew the way to Larissa could lead others there correctly, but so too could a man who had true beliefs about how to get there, even if he had not gone there or had any knowledge of Larissa. Socrates says that it seems that both knowledge and true opinion can guide action. Meno then wonders why knowledge is valued more than true belief and why knowledge and true belief are different. Socrates responds that knowledge is more valuable than mere true belief because it is thither or justified. Justification or working out the reason for a true belief locks down true beliefs. So that's not abstract belief. I mean, let's look at it like this. How do you get the facts? How do you get to the facts? See, you can't get to the facts without having the beliefs. Now, speaking of term abstract beliefs, there's going to always be the abstract and that's going to always be the concrete. Because you can look at something concrete, right? But you can have a different abstract system. I'm going to say that again. You can look at something being very concrete, but you can have different abstract system. Now, what do I mean by that? I can look at something physical, right? I can look at this bookmark. Now, when I look at this bookmark, I see something physical. It says One Depart in theaters March 15th. All right, this came out in 2019, right? And you got some animation going on. You see animated characters, etc. All right, that's the concrete of it. We see the art behind this. We see the art, we see the image, and we see it's a bookmark. But the abstract of it is that it's more than just the image. It's more than just a bookmark. This is an indication of the fact that a person is a reader, and whoever is a reader, they make sure that they don't forget where they stopped off at as far as what their reading is. So no, it's not going to tell you that per se from a concrete standpoint, but you know what it symbolizes, right? You understand the symbolic meaning of it, okay? Or some people might look at it and say that, well, this is just something that they can use so that way they won't forget about what book they read. But this is a marker to show that a person who is a reader, they always carry this around, so it's a reminder, okay? But so what I'm saying is to say this and say that we can look at something concrete, but we can have different abstract systems. Yes, knowledge is more concrete and solid. Yes, that's not an argument. That is a fact. It is concrete and solid. But it's also, you have the abstract of it too. We cannot ignore the abstract behind it. We cannot ignore the abstract, because see, if we ignore the abstract and focus on the concrete, then we lose ourselves. We're not being more thoughtful. Okay, we're not being thoughtful because we're just dealing with the concrete of things. We're dealing with the physicality of something and not looking at the non-physicality. I'll be following along. I hope I'm not all over the place. I hope you get where I'm coming from. All right. Let me go ahead and let's look at this last part right here. The problem is to identify what, if anything, makes knowledge more valuable than mere true belief, or that makes knowledge more valuable than a mere minimum conjunction of its components, such as justification, safety, sensitivity, statistical likelihood, and anti-getter conditions, on a particular analysis of knowledge that conceives of knowledge as divided into components, to which knowledge first epistemological theories which posit knowledge as fundamental are a notable exception. The value problem re-emerged in the philosophical literature on epistemology in the 21st century following the rise of virtue epistemology in the 1980s, partly because of the obvious link to the concept of values in ethics. All right. Then it goes into scientific knowledge. Of course, you know, we always hear people talk about scientific knowledge, all of that, but I'm going to come back to that. Okay. And then we're going to come back to the concept about situated knowledge too. All right. Partial knowledge, all of that. I ain't forgot. I'm going to make sure that I'll come back and deal with the concept about scientific knowledge, etc. All right. But let's go ahead and let's go to the next source. All right, so Now, right here, this is one of my personal favorite websites to go to. This is called the In-Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And yes, it is peer-reviewed academic resource. So it is reliable, okay? Now, let's check this out. So what it says, knowledge. Philosophy history or reflection upon knowledge is a history of theses and theories, but no less of questions, concept distinction, synthesis, and taxonomies. All of these will appear in the article. They generate color and refine these philosophical theses and theories about knowledge. The results are epistemological, right? Philosophical attempts to understand whatever it is most fundamentally understandable about the nature and availability of knowledge. Now, let's go down to where it talks about the kind of knowledge. So, kinds of knowledge, we talk of knowledge, all of us do, philosophers do, but what is knowledge? We can best answer that potentially complex question in several stages. Let us begin by considering whether there are different kinds of knowledge. Epistemologists have contemplated at least the following general possibility. Knowing by acquaintance, right? Knowledge WH, knowing how, okay? It goes into the knowledge as a kind, ways of knowing, innate knowledge, observational knowledge, and knowing purely by thinking. And knowing by thinking plus observing. We do that a lot, don't we? Don't we think and don't we observe things? We look at something and then we're thinking about something, like we see somebody do some crazy shit, right? Let's say somebody do something real fucked up and you looking and you just watching them do some fucked up ass shit and you wonder to yourself, well, what did this person gain out of this? What was they trying to do? Why would they be doing that? Why do this when you could have did that? Or why do this situation when that situation could have been avoided if you would have done something totally different? We all do that. We all see somebody do some shit though, and we wonder, well, why in the hell is they doing that shit? Why they not doing something else? Why do this and why put yourself in that situation when you could have did something else different? And then we start to imagine ourselves. We start to put ourselves in their shoes and say something like, well, if I was that person, I would have never done that. Or I would have never put up with that individual. I would have just went on ahead and let that person go and go ahead and deal with somebody else who I have the time and patience for. Something like that. But yeah, thinking plus observing. Skeptical doubts about knowing. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Standards for knowing, etc., on and on and on and on. All right. Now, let's go ahead and let's go down to where it says standard for knowing. All right, so standards for knowing. Many philosophical questions about knowledge, its nature and availability may be treated as questions about standards. We expect knowledge to amount to something, to be an improvement in some respect upon various forms of non-knowledge. All right, so it goes into section 5, ending by asking about knowledge and inflatabilism. We may now consider a wider range of possible standards, beginning with inflatability, which have at times been placed by epistemologists and other upon knowing. So, certainty or infallibility. Now, there is a recurrent temptation often felt by philosopher and non-philosopher alike to impose some kind of infallibility standard upon knowing. This can even feel intuitive to the person applying the standard. One version of that temptation talks of certainty, not necessarily a subjectively experienced sense of certainty, but what is usually termed an epistemic kind of certainty. The latter amounts to certainties being a rationally inviolable and unimprovable form of justificatory support, regardless of whether it feels so perfect. Now, why would one adopt such a demanding view of knowledge? Perhaps because the alternative could feel no undemanding. Consider the apparent oddity of claims like this. I do know that I'm looking at a dingo, even though I could be mistaken. That's funny. Wait a minute. That's a funny example. I could be looking at a dingo, even though I could be mistaken. Now, you could perceive that different ways, right? I could be looking at a dingo, but I could be mistaken. Now, one might perceive that as when the word dingo. Peace to Young Dub. How you doing? What's up, Young Dub? So when you say the word dingo, right? That could be perceived in multiple ways. What is a dingo? Could a dingo be an object? Wait a minute. Could a dingo be an object, or could a dingo be something? This is rated R, okay? Could a dingo be a object, or could a dingo be somebody's genital area? What could a dingo be? So if I'm looking at a dingo an object, or is it their genital area? Or I might be mistaken. It may not look like it might not be that genital area, right, of an individual, like I perceive it to be. You know, I could perceive it as being a genital area, but it may not be that. It might be something else. But my mind is playing tricks on me. My mind seeing one thing, but my eyes seeing something totally different. So my eyes looking, I know that my eyes is looking at something, but my mind is telling me that, well, you might see a dingo. You might see a male genitalia area. And then if I look closely at it again, that might not be what it is. It might not be a genitalia area. It might be something that appears to be that. You know what I'm saying? It appears to be the genital, but it may not be that. It might be something that might be sitting on that person's lap, or whatever the case may be. But okay, so I mean, but you got to understand. So the whole thing is, again, your eyes perceive one thing, your eyes looking at something, right? But your mind might think is something else. And that's where optical illusion come in. So one day I'm going to get into the concept about optical illusion too. You know what I'm saying? Talk about that, whatever. Because that deals with psychology, optical illusion. Because you might look at an object for a long time, you thinking that, oh, it's an actual object. But it's really not an actual object. It's something else behind that object, but you ain't seeing it because you're not paying attention. You're paying attention to what is in front of you and not what's in the back of it. So it may not just be that object in itself. It may be multiple things. And so that's the whole thing about optical illusion, being able to see that it's multiple things and not just one thing, meaning that you can't just focus on that one particular thing and just think that that's just what it is, because there's more to it. So it's the same thing when we deal with knowledge, right? It's more to just that one form of knowledge, right? You focusing on that one particular subject of that field, but it's multiple facet of that field. It's multiple information behind that field, but you only focusing on that one particular subject, but it's more to it, right? Could it be a dingleberry? But you know what? That's an interesting example, though. I ain't even gonna lie. That's an interesting example. All right. All right. So going down, it says, of course, there remains the possibility that knowing is merely incapable with saying or thinking, that one is possibly mistaken, not with the fact of one's possibility being mistaken. That this is why the oddity of concessive knowledge attribution might not entail knowledge of including certainty or inflatability. The matter is currently being debated. All right. So let's look at flatterability. The specter of a skeptical conclusion is the most obvious philosophical concern about requiring knowledge to satisfy an infallibilist standard. If knowledge is like that, then how often will anyone succeed in actually having some knowledge? Rarely, if ever. For people's in profession in their attempts to know will be incompatible with the success of those attempts. If profession is required for such success, anyone who accepts infallibilism about some or all knowledge must confirm the question or confront the question of whether he or she wants thereby to deny that any such knowledge is ever actually attained. Be a skeptic, for example, even as he allowed that some knowledge, if it was to be presented, would have to be certain. All right, so the question is become, what is flatterability and inflatability? Now let's go to that. Let's look at flatterability. All right, so I'm gonna try to get through this. All right, so flatterable, right? Let's look it up. What does that mean? If something is flatterable, if you say that someone or something is flatterable, you mean that they are not perfect and are likely to make mistakes or to fail in what they are doing. All right. So basically, flatterable means that it could be a mistake and a person or something could fail. All right. And inflatable means that it's perfection. There's no imperfection and that it cannot fail. So this is the question. Well, can knowledge be flatterable and inflatable? I say yes, it can be. It can be inflatable because if it's perfected and there's nothing to go against it or to disprove it or to discredit, then yeah, it could be inflatable. But if there is something to disprove it or discredit, and there's information that comes along to correct something, then it can be flatterable. All right, it can be flatterable. So yeah, so in other words, you can get the error in knowledge, and you can receive the knowledge that is that's based on profession and that cannot be disputed, right? That is undisputed. So yeah, knowledge can have its form of flatterability and inflatability. All right. All right. So now let me go back to, and again, you guys want to check this out. I will strongly recommend you guys to even look at this website. It's called the in-Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Please check this website out. It's like one of the most resourceable website ever. And also along with Stanford.edu. Okay, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. All right, so now let's go into let's go back to the Wikipedia source real fast, okay? Because I want to go back to the various forms of knowledge real quick. Right. So now going back to the first paragraph where it says descriptive knowledge, procedural knowledge, and acquaintance knowledge. Right. So descriptive knowledge deals with what facts, and procedural knowledge deals with skills, and acquaintance knowledge deals with objects. So let's look at descriptive knowledge for a moment. Now, in epistemology, right, descriptive knowledge, also known as propositional knowledge, knowing that declarative knowledge or constitutive knowledge is knowledge that can be expressed in a declarative sentence or indicative proposition. Knowing that can be contrasted with knowing how, also known as procedural knowledge, which is knowing how to perform some tasks, including knowing how to perform it successfully. All right. So as we can see here, the distinction between knowing how and knowing that was brought to prominence in epistemology by Gilbert Ryle, who used it in his book, The Concept of Mind. And I had to check that book out for myself personally. For Ryle, the former differs in its emphasis and purpose, since it is primarily practical knowledge, whereas the latter focuses on indicative or explanatory knowledge. Right. So we know that descriptive knowledge is basically dealing with something that can be expressed in declarative sentence. Okay. Or it can be indicative. Okay. So now let's go in procedural knowledge. So procedural knowledge is the knowledge exercised in performance or of some task, unlike descriptive knowledge, right, which involves knowledge of specific facts or proposition. Procedural knowledge involves one's ability to do something. A person does not need to be able to verbally articulate their procedural knowledge in order for it to count as knowledge, since procedural knowledge requires only knowing how to correctly perform an action or exercise a skill. Now, that is procedural knowledge. So procedural knowledge is dealing with what? Being able to do something. Oops. Hold on. Let me get back to the article. All right, so descriptive knowledge, as you can see, what the key word is, descriptive, meaning what pretty much to describe. So you got to be able to describe and being able to know how to give about a description of something. All right, so now let's go down to where it says acquaintance knowledge. Now, what does it mean to have acquaintance knowledge? Knowledge about acquaintance in philosophy. A distinction is often made between two different kinds of knowledge. Knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description. Whereas knowledge by description is something like ordinary propositional knowledge. Knowledge by acquaintance is familiarity with a person, place, or thing, typically obtained through perceptual experience. All right, so that means, for example, with acquaintance knowledge, let's say you know somebody for a long time, but here's the thing, I'm gonna get into that. But you know somebody, you grew up with somebody, and you hear that person's name. You hear DeAndre's name. Somebody say, well, you know a guy named DeAndre Johnson, and you say, yeah, I know who DeAndre Johnson is. I grew up with DeAndre. I went to school with DeAndre, etc. We grew up on the same block in the same neighborhood, etc. So that is called acquaintance knowledge. But sometimes when it comes to a person, you think that you know them, but you may not really know them. Hold on. You think you know them, but you don't really know them. You only know them based on your familiarity with them. You know them based on their character, based on what they present to you, how they act around you. Okay? That's how you know them. But you really don't know them. You don't know them on a deeper level. You don't know them behind closed doors when they're not around you. Okay? There's a Japanese proverb that states that there's three kind of masks that people wear. The mask that you wear around your family, the mask that you wear around your family and your friends, the mask that you wear to the public's eye, and the mask that you wear behind closed doors. So, in other words, people only know you based on how you present yourself to them. People know you based on the character they see in you. That's how people know you. But outside of that, people don't really know you when you're not around them. They don't actually know what you're doing unless you reveal that part of them or unless you reveal that part of yourself to them. But other than that, they only know you based on the presentation that you give them. They know you based on what you do around them. But when you're away and you're not in the spotlight and people don't see you, that's when they don't really know, because they don't really know what really goes on when you're not around. That could be your dark side. But that's something to really think about right there, right? Okay, so I'm gonna close that out. And let's see. All right, so let's go on to the last one. So I'm going to go on to this last article right here. The last article say, let's start by asking. It's called The Structure of Knowledge by H.M. Collins. And then it goes on to say, let's start by asking how knowledge is transferred. Consider a couple of light-hearted but revealing accounts. A common strip in my possession concerns industrial espionage between firms which manufacture experts system. One firm has gained a lead in the market by developing super expert systems, and another firm employs a spy to find out how they do it. The spy breaks into other firms only to discover that they are capturing human experts, removing their brain, slicing them very thin, and inserting the slices into their top-selling model. Capturing the spy, they remove and slice his brain, enabling them to offer a line of industrial espionage as expert systems. Right, so this article came out in 1993. This is a social research. So it talks about the 4 kinds of knowledge, right? So let's skip over this. All right, so let me It says we now have the beginnings of a classification system. There are some type of knowledge ability and skills that cannot be transferred simply by passing signal from one brain computer to another. In these types of knowledge, the hardware is important. There are other types of knowledge that can be transferred without worrying about hardware. So it says some aspect of the ability skills of humans are contained in the body. Could it be that there are types of knowledge that have to do with the brain physicalness rather than its computerness? Yes, certain of our cognitive ability have to do with the physical setup of the brain. So it says there is the matter of the way neurons are interconnected, but it may also have something to do with the brain as a piece of chemistry or a collection of solid shapes. Templates or sleeves can physical objects of different shapes or size. Perhaps the brain works like this, or like the working medium of analog computers. Let us call this kind of knowledge in brain. It is interesting to note that insofar as knowledge is in brain, especially if this knowledge were stored holographically, to use another metaphor. All right, so let me talk about that real fast. Let's talk about let's talk about this whole concept as the brain being the computer. All right, so where I stand on that position as far as the brain being the so-called computer, right? It's really not a computer. It's basically just an organ. Your brain, because there's no, I mean, there is some type of, I guess there is some type of bioelectricity that operates in the brain, but the brain itself is just a functional organ. That's all it is, just a functional organ that helps you to be able to remember, to be able to think, to be able to smell, to be able to do all these different things. But it's not really a computer, as in it's not computational. So, and I got something, and I have information to support that argument too. But then again, that would be another subject in a for another day, because then that's when you have to get into the concept of the biology of consciousness. So that's something I have to deal with another day, and talk more about. So, but I'm just going to show you guys. I'm just going to show you guys the information about the biology of consciousness. Okay, and who was written by. So next time you see me do a video about this, you will know that this is what I'm building on. So, Biology of Consciousness by Gerald M. Edelman. All right. So, yeah. So, Gerald M. Edelman deals with the biology of consciousness. So, yeah, one day I'm going to build on that subject matter. Okay. I'll give y'all a date and a time for that. But let's go ahead and let's keep it pushing. So, now I got some more books that I want to just share with y'all. All right, so right here, this is the article. Okay, so this book right here is called The Nature and Value of Knowledge, 3 Investigation by Duncan Pitcher, Alan Miller, and Adrian Haddock. Okay, so that's the title of the book. It's called the nature and value of knowledge. What is this thing called knowledge? Duncan Pitcher. Yeah, what is this thing called knowledge? All right, this one's called Knowledge and Its Limit by Timothy Williams. Okay, so it started off as a dissertation, as you can see here. All right. So I'm not going to go over that, but anyways, this one is called Theories of Knowledge, How to Think About What You Know, course guidebook. All right, this is by Professor Joseph H. Schibber. Let me see how it's set up. So the introduction, the guide's philosophy and transformative experiences, knowledge, truth and beliefs, foundationalism, Descartes' evil demon, the coherence theory of knowledge, the externalism theories of knowledge, problem with self-knowledge, which I'm going to do tomorrow because that's going to be the part 2 of this. Does sense perception support knowledge? Perception, foundationalism, and externalism. All right. So it's over 24 chapter in this book. Okay. And then what channel would I recommend you guys to watch? Well, my favorite channel. My favorite channel is hold on. I'm about to pull it up for you guys in a moment. All right, so this is one of my personal channels. I always recommend this channel. It's called Closer to Truth. Epistemology, how do I know? All right, and then you can see where the interviews was taking place. Robert Aldi, Epistemology, how do we know what we know? Epistemology, how can we know God? So you see the concept of God being incorporated into the questions. There's another interview, Epistemology, how do we know what we know? Justin Barron, Art and Epistemology, Andy Clark. Theological epistemology, how can we know God? And then here's another one. What is beliefs? What is truth? Arguing God's existence. What is philosophy of science? Can art and knowledge enhance each other? Well, yes, of course, knowledge and art can enhance each other because you can't have one without the other. But anyways, what is truth? Does philosophy inform religion? Well, that's a good question. Does philosophy inform religion? Well, I mean, I would say that philosophy gave light to religion because religion would not be here if it wasn't for philosophy. But anyways, Walter Sinnott Armstrong, big question in Free Will Project. Can moral theory affect deep ontology? And it just goes on and on. What is belief? Search for meanings. Did God create abstract objects? Atheism best arguments. Yeah, so this is the channel that I recommend people to look at, which is called Closer to Truth. It's a great channel. It's a very educational channel at that. One of my personal favorites. Okay. So now that's it. So that's part one of this. So I hope that you guys were able to, I hope you guys find it very interesting and you guys enjoyed the channel, etc. I know I know that I had put out too many information. That's what I do over here. I do use a lot of sources, okay? I do walk through sources because I have to be able to walk through sources in order to be able to explain my position and be able to get into the subject matter, all right? But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share the channel, like the channel, all that great stuff. And until next time, y'all be safe. Peace and power, elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off saying deuces. And I thank you guys so much for being very supportive of my page. Make sure you guys check me out on Facebook. If you don't have my Facebook information, check me out, which is you just type in my name. And also my Instagram is EastsideTip. And I have a TikTok, which is Lightbread89. So yeah, check me out on those 3 pages, okay? And I also have a Clubhouse. My Clubhouse is TIPFRENCH. TIPFRENCH on Clubhouse. So I do be on there from time to time, all right? But again, y'all have a good one. And I'll come back with y'all with some more. All right, deuces. Peace.